Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. I'm your host, and I want you to picture something. It is 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, we all know that feeling.
Right. You are staring up at the ceiling, just watching the shadows from a street lamp slowly crawl across the plaster. Your body is just utterly exhausted, but your brain is, well, it's a runaway freight train.
You're agonizing over some slightly weird email you sent like 3 days ago.
Exactly. Or you're calculating exactly how many hours of sleep you'll get if you manage to fall asleep this very second. We have all been there. That desperate, agonizing effort of trying to force your own brain to just shut down.
It is a completely universal struggle. And ironically, the harder you try to wrestle your mind into submission, the more awake you actually become.
Which is why today we're doing something a little different. Usually on this deep dive, we are, dissecting complex arguments or exploring the cutting edge of science. We operate at a pretty brisk intellectual sprint.
We definitely do.
But today, I want to lower the temperature. I want you, the listener, to just take a breath. Because we're looking at a piece of source material that explicitly does not want to stimulate you.
It's a highly specific, almost hypnotic text called the Quiet Village script.
Yeah, and on the surface, it reads like an incredibly mundane, simple story.
Very simple.
But when you look at the explicit production and recording notes attached to the text, the whole illusion just shatters. Our mission today is to realize that this isn't just a story, it is a blueprint.
A piece of psychological engineering, really.
Yes, designed to actively hack the human nervous system and drag it down into deep sleep. We are going to deconstruct its anatomy to figure out exactly how these chosen words, the sensory details, and those strict stage directions physically manipulate a listener into a state of rest.
It's a fascinating process to break down.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand what's happening, we need to stop looking at this text as a piece of literature. We have to view it almost like a piece of sheet music.
I love that analogy. Sheet music is the perfect lens for this.
Think about a symphony, right? The notes themselves matter, obviously. The melody carries the emotion. But what actually dictates the physical impact of the piece?
The rests, the tempo changes.
Exactly, the volume cues. The silence between the notes is what actually creates the tension and the release. And when you dig into the production notes for The Quiet Village, the instructions for the pacing are, frankly, infinitely more demanding than the text itself.
The sheer level of control the script demands over the delivery is intense. It explicitly instructs the narrator to read the entire text through once at a normal conversational pace.
Just a normal pace for the first pass.
Right, but that is just the setup. The notes mandate a second pass and then a third. And with each repetition, the narrator is instructed to speak progressively slower.
Slower and in a progressively lower register, too.
Yes, it is an enforced deceleration. You aren't just telling a story, you are performing an acoustic descent.
By starting at a normal pace, the narrator is like meeting the listener where they are. Because when you first slide into bed, your mind is still operating at the speed of your day.
It's moving in what we'd call conversational time.
Right, and if a narrator were to instantly start whispering at a glacial, molasses-like pace right out of the gate, your brain would reject it. It feels jarring. It feels totally artificial.
You have to hook you at your current velocity, match your speed, establish a connection, and then slowly drag your tempo down to match theirs.
But see, that brings up a specific instruction in these notes that I really struggle with. Honestly, it sounds like an absolute nightmare to me.
You're talking about the mandated pauses.
The pauses. The production notes dictate in very strict terms that the narrator must leave a 3 to 5 second pause between every single line of text.
Which is a long time.
I want you, listening right now, to think about how long 5 seconds of dead air actually is. In a normal conversation, a 1 second pause is just taking a breath. A 2 second pause means the person is gathering their thoughts.
And a 3 second pause feels like they completely forgot what they were talking about.
Exactly. And 5 seconds is excruciating. If I'm at a dinner party and someone pauses for 5 seconds while just looking at me, my adrenaline spikes. I am instantly wondering if I have spinach in my teeth or if I, accidentally insulted their mother.
It breaks the fundamental rules of human social interaction.
It totally does.
Yeah.
So how on earth does a deliberate, painfully awkward silence actually aid relaxation?
What's fascinating here is that your reaction is biologically correct, but only for a waking social context.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning our brains are hardwired by evolution to interpret a sudden rupture in conversational rhythm as a threat. The sudden silence signals that the social dynamic has shifted dangerously.
Which triggers a mild fight or flight response. So
Exactly.
it's the literal opposite of relaxing.
In a social setting, yes, but the script relies on the fact that you are alone, you're in the dark, and you are not expected to reply. By forcing these cavernous 5-second pauses, the script is aggressively pulling your brain out of that conversational time expectation.
Oh.
It is deliberately starving your brain of the rhythm it anticipates.
When you put it like that, it sounds almost like cognitive hijacking, because my brain is sitting there waiting for the next piece of information,
Yeah.
and the information just doesn't arrive.
It doesn't.
So what does the brain do in that vacuum?
It creates a physical shift through a biological principle called entrainment. Entrainment is the tendency of our internal biological rhythms, like our heart rate, our brain waves, and our breathing to synchronize with external rhythms in our environment.
Okay, like how runners will match their footfalls to the beat of the music they're listening to?
Precisely. Or how your heart rate physically speeds up when you hear a fast, frantic techno track.
Right.
That is entrainment in action. When you are listening to a voice that is speaking incredibly slowly and leaving massive gaps of silence between simple thoughts, your breathing naturally begins to elongate to fill those spaces.
You unconsciously start inhaling during the 5-second silence and then exhaling when the low, slow voice returns.
Yes, the social awkwardness you mentioned. That fades after the first 2 or 3 lines. Very quickly, the listener's physiology just surrenders to the new, slower metronome.
So the words are essentially just scaffolding. The silence is the actual building. The pause is the mechanism of relaxation, pulling your respiratory rate down with it.
And the vagus nerve, which acts as the brake pedal for your nervous system, is stimulated by that deep, slow breathing. The script is forcing you to breathe your way into a calmer state without ever explicitly telling you to take a deep breath.
That is incredibly clever. But, a slowed heart rate doesn't necessarily stop a racing mind. If you slow my breathing down but leave my brain completely empty during those long 5-second pauses, I'm just going to start thinking about my taxes.
Which necessitates the specific imagery the script provides.
Right. Let's look at the sensory environment this text builds. Because the imagery is incredibly specific, yet totally sparse, it is a masterclass in contrasting sensations.
It really is.
The script introduces a small village by a calm river. We get the comforting warmth of morning tea, which is later contrasted with the feeling of cool river water. We get the visual of the sky turning a deep orange in the evening.
It engages multiple sensory domains systematically. You have temperature, color, tactile sensation, and spatial awareness.
But one detail stood out to me above everything else. In the second stanza, the text says, "In the village there is a small house. The house has a red roof."
A red roof.
Out of all the things a writer could describe, the architectural style of the house, the types of trees, the layout of the cobblestone streets, the script zeroes in on this one specific vivid color, a red roof. It reminds me of looking at a giant minimalist painting.
Paint that picture for us. How do you mean?
Imagine walking into an art gallery and staring at a massive, completely white canvas. But in the lower right corner, there's one single, small, red square.
Your eye cannot help but go to that red square.
Right. It anchors your vision completely. I think this script is doing the exact same thing for the mind's eye. If you tell an anxious, overthinking brain to simply imagine a village, that brain is going to start building a sprawling, complicated metropolis.
Oh, for sure. It's going to wonder about the village's agricultural economy.
Exactly. Or whether the houses have modern plumbing.
The cognitive load of inventing the village from scratch is simply too high.
Exactly. But if you say, look at the house with the red roof, you hand the brain a single focal point. You give the mind just enough detail to anchor itself so it doesn't drift back into its own anxieties, but the image is so simple it doesn't actively stimulate the prefrontal cortex.
That is a phenomenal way to understand cognitive load during the onset of sleep. There's a network in our brains called the default mode network.
Okay.
It activates when we aren't focused on the outside world, and its primary job is self-referential thought. Basically, it's the part of your brain that generates anxiety about the past and worries about the future.
So when people try to fall asleep by forcing their minds to be completely blank, the default mode network kicks into overdrive.
The classic don't think about a pink elephant paradox. The harder you try to think of nothing, the more your brain floods the zone with your to-do list.
Because a vacuum demands to be filled, you cannot give the brain nothing. You must give it a toy to play with to keep the default mode network occupied.
But it has to be an incredibly boring, low-stakes toy.
A red roof, warm tea, an orange sky.
And the production notes take this sensory management even further. They suggest adding a bed of light river water or soft bird sounds beneath the narration.
So a full soundscape to accompany the words.
But consider the specific sounds requested. Continuous, non-threatening natural white noise, flowing water, distant birds. These layers of sensory cues, the visual anchor of the red roof, the tactile memory of the warm tea, the auditory masking of the flowing river, they act as a cognitive firewall. Let's call it a sensory quarantine.
A sensory quarantine, I like that. How does the auditory masking work within that quarantine?
In evolutionary terms, our brains constantly scan the environment for sudden, sharp noises that might indicate a predator. A snapping twig, a footstep.
Things that would wake you up instantly.
Right. When you introduce continuous white noise like a flowing river, it creates an acoustic blanket that masks those sudden environmental noises. The brain registers the continuous sound as a signal that the environment is stable and safe.
So the boundaries are clearly defined. You are in the village, by the river, and nothing outside of that acoustic blanket exists.
You are building a gentle little fence around the listener's imagination, locking the anxiety out.
So we have the decelerating tempo dragging the heart rate down. We have the sensory details building a safe quarantine for the mind. But every environment needs an inhabitant. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. The protagonist of this text.
The only character we meet.
Right, the old man who lives in the house with the red roof. Let's look at the narrative arc of this old man. He wakes up early, he drinks warm tea, he walks to the river, he sits under a tree, he feels peaceful.
That's it.
That is the entire plot. For anyone who loves storytelling, the absolute glaring absence of any conflict, any stakes, or any forward momentum is almost shocking. There is no inciting incident. He doesn't drop his tea mug. A bear doesn't emerge from the woods to threaten him.
It violates every fundamental rule of traditional narrative structure.
It totally does. But I'm guessing that violation is the entire point.
In literature, we use tension to keep the reader engaged. Will the detective solve the murder? Will the hero survive the battle? That tension creates a mild stress response in the body.
It elevates cortisol. It keeps you alert.
Exactly. And in a sleep script, tension is poison.
So the old man's routine is aggressively, almost painfully mundane by design.
He is entirely devoid of conflict. If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, because he is devoid of conflict, he becomes the perfect emotional surrogate for the listener to project onto.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that, because I know from personal experience that trying to force yourself to relax is impossible. I have literally laid in bed, clenching my jaw, aggressively repeating the word relax in my head.
It is awful.
It is. How does this old man bypass that?
It comes down to mirror neurons. Humans are deeply empathetic, social creatures. Our mirror neurons fire not just when we perform an action, but when we observe someone else performing it. Think about seeing someone bite into a raw wedge of lemon.
Oh, my mouth instantly starts watering, just thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or when you read a thriller and the character is hiding in a closet from an intruder, your own heart rate elevates. You physically mirror their state of fear.
So when the text forces us to watch an old man sitting under a tree, feeling perfectly peaceful as the sky turns orange.
You mirror his peace. The script circumvents your active, frustrating effort to relax by simply showing you someone else who is already there. By observing a figure who feels completely safe, who has absolutely nowhere to be and no problems to solve, the listener implicitly adopts that same sense of safety. The old man is demonstrating the physiological state the script wants you to achieve. He is giving your nervous system permission to let go.
It is vicarious relaxation. You watch him wind down with the setting sun, and your body naturally follows his lead without you having to force it. Which brings us to the final moments of the script. The sun goes down, the stars come out, and the village goes to sleep. And then there is a massive dramatic shift in the text itself.
The breaking of the fourth wall.
Yes. Throughout the entire script, we have been observers. We have been looking at the village, looking at the red roof, watching the old man. We are safely tucked away in the third person. But the final 3 lines pivot entirely.
They do.
The script turns its attention away from the old man, points directly at the listener, and says, "You are safe. You are calm. Now close your eyes and sleep."
This raises an important question about the sequencing of psychological framing. Why wait until the very end to speak to the listener directly? Why not just start the script with the words, "You are safe, you are calm"?
I can answer that immediately. If I am lying in bed, vibrating with stress from an awful day at work, and a voice tells me I am calm, my brain is going to call that voice a liar. I will actively reject the premise.
Direct reassurance only works when the physiological groundwork has already been laid. If you attempt to command the nervous system to relax prematurely, it rebels. The analytical part of your brain throws up a wall.
Right.
But look at what the architecture of this text has achieved by the time it reaches those final lines.
It has forced my breathing to slow down with the 5-second pauses, stimulating the vagus nerve.
It has occupied your default mode network and anchored your cognitive load with the image of the red roof and the orange sky.
And it has pacified my empathy by making my mirror neurons reflect a completely stress-free old man.
Your guard is completely down. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, is fully dominant. Only then, at the absolute peak of this engineered vulnerability, does the script step in and offer that direct second-person reassurance: you are safe.
It's like the script has been walking you down a long hallway, and finally it hands you the key to a door you've been standing in front of.
It acts as the ultimate psychological release. The listener has been methodically guided to the very edge of consciousness. Once the critical, analytical part of your brain has been bypassed by the slow pacing and the simple imagery, you enter a state of high suggestibility. That final command is the gentle push over the edge into sleep.
So what does this all mean? We've taken this incredibly simple text and torn it down to the studs. We've seen how the architecture of pacing forces physical entrainment.
And how sensory anchors build a quarantine against anxious thoughts.
Exactly, and how the total absence of narrative conflict allows for vicarious relaxation. It is, quite frankly, a benevolent manipulation of the body.
It is a profound tool, and it highlights a fundamental truth about how our minds operate when we strip away the noise.
I think the real value for you listening to this deep dive right now isn't just knowing the trivia of how a sleep script functions. It is recognizing the mechanics of deceleration. We live in a society obsessed with acceleration.
Very much so.
We are perpetually bombarded with rapid-fire information, complex sensory inputs, and high-stakes narratives. Understanding that our brains physically require repetition, sensory anchoring, and forced pauses to alter our state of consciousness gives us a blueprint for how to manage our own minds.
It proves that relaxation is not merely the absence of activity. It is a highly structured, intentional process of letting go. You have to provide your brain with the proper environment to power down safely.
You cannot just slam your laptop shut after reading a stressful email and expect your brain to instantly switch off. You have to, walk it down the stairs.
Which leaves us with a rather provocative thought to consider. We have spent all this time analyzing how a low-stakes, incredibly slow story about an old man by a river, especially when it is repeated slower and slower, is necessary to physically lower our heart rate, entrain our breathing, and induce a state of unconsciousness.
Because the biological requirements for rest are quite strict.
They are. So if this carefully constructed sheet music of silence, routine, and simplicity is what the human nervous system actually requires to transition smoothly into restorative rest, well, what does that reveal about the fast-paced, high-stakes, conflict-driven media we are constantly consuming right before we try to sleep?
Oh, you are talking about the doom scrolling, lying in bed just swiping through the phone.
Exactly. If a quiet village can engineer sleep, what kind of physiological state are we engineering when the very last thing we look at is an endless, high-speed feed of global anxieties, flashing lights, and unresolved arguments?
We are essentially handing our brain a frantic, chaotic piece of sheet music full of high notes and rapid tempos, and then getting angry when it can't play a lullaby. It is definitely something to think about tonight, right before you reach to turn off the light. Are you feeding your mind a quiet village, or are you feeding it a hurricane?